Street Journal and Dan Balz of the Washington Post. Thanks, guys, for joining us. I want to start with someone more veteran than the two of you, and that's Bob Dole, the Republican nominee in '96 and in the Senate forever before that. I talked to him earlier. He, of course, is a Romney supporter, and I asked him why, and I want to play you his response.
He looks like a president. He acts like a president. He talks like a president, and it just seems to me this is Romney's time.
Does it seem to you this is Romney's time?
Well, in many ways it does seem like it's Romney's time. I mean, he is the person who has run before. He's a favorite of a lot of the Republican establishment. He's scooping up endorsements. For a long time, people have thought that if there's a likely nominee, it's him, and yet he has struggled and struggled and struggled to show, A, that he can generate enthusiasm among the base of a party that's clearly in a different place than he is, and two, to grow the support over what he's had in the past.
And he is blessed in some ways by who he is running against.
Yeah, I mean, that's the amazing thing. What's interesting, the Des Moines Register poll that came out this morning had him at basically exactly where he was 4 years ago in the Des Moines Register poll then, and yet, of course, he lost that race. The magic of this Iowa caucus is he could win conceivably with that same support, mainly because there's such a fractured field on the other side of the Republican spectrum.
And it's the evangelical vote,
right.
The conservative, the religious conservative vote that put Huckabee over the top, and now they're looking at 4 different candidates, which is why there is all this talk about the evangelicals trying to get one of these guys to get out.
Yeah, there's been a whole series of meetings among pastors and others over the last month or weeks. It's not going to happen, that's pretty clear, but trying to kind of cut a deal among Rick Perry, Michelle Bachmann, for there to be a sort of coalescing. And the only coalescing that's going on now, it's been amazing to watch, is the coalescing of sorts behind Rick Santorum. And, in the end, if evangelicals come out in large numbers, and it's sort of sketchy at the moment on the polling whether they will, they could possibly push him into a second place or maybe even into the first place.
Then we'd have a story to write, although I wonder...
We'll have a story to write.
Yeah, that's true. Either way, I'd probably say something about it on Wednesday morning. I was amazed, I think, when Newt Gingrich began to rise at the beginning of December. Everybody thought, this is not Michelle Bachmann, this is not Rick Perry, this is a guy who's been around the block. It's not his first rodeo. He can really use this limelight and turn it into something. In that Des Moines Register poll, where he's out of the upper tier, a couple of things caught my eye. 36% of the likely Republican caucus goers found him to be the least consistent candidate. 41% thought he was the most ego-driven candidate. What happened to Newt? Did he do himself in and was helped along by the ads, or did the ads just remind people who he was and that was sort of solely responsible?
I think the ads have had a lot to do with it. I mean, he's had a tremendous amount of attack poured on him for the last month and has basically violated the fundamental rule of politics, which is don't let an attack go unanswered. He tried to stay above it, in part, I think, because he knew that his own history suggested that if he went hard against those, it would bring up the bad side of Newt that people remember. So he was in a very difficult position, but I think those ads did a tremendous amount of damage to him.
His greatest moments were the many, many debates that we had. That's really what catapulted him up in the polls. And then we went into this big period, a couple of weeks, where there were no debates, and instead there was this, aerial barrage on him here in Iowa, and that's what's done it for him, I think.
So in a lot of ways, Newt Gingrich's down has been Rick Santorum's up. And I think the question now is, does Rick Santorum become 2012's Mike Huckabee? In other words, someone who wins Iowa, and it just doesn't matter in the long run.
I think one of the greatest benefits that Mitt Romney is getting so far in Iowa is the fact that 2 of the people who might have had the wherewithal to go the distance against him, Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry, because Governor Perry has had a lot of money to use, now look like they could finish out of the money, which is to say that he could keep them from going on. Rick Santorum may be able to gather some strength. If he were to pull off a surprise victory, he'll be the hot candidate. But he has very little infrastructure, very little money, and perhaps a ceiling on the kind of appeal he might be able to put together.
Let me play for you real quick. Santorum put an ad up recently that I think speaks to the biggest thing that weighs him down at this point. Take a listen.
Who has the best chance to beat Obama? Rick Santorum, a trusted conservative who gives us the best chance to take back America.
who has the best chance to beat Obama, Rick Santorum. It seems to me that they know that their biggest problem is that people look and go, yeah, that's nice, but Rick Santorum just doesn't have the wherewithal. Does this, and I asked both of our Iowa politicians, do you think this race in Iowa right now comes down to caucus goers wanting the most electable or caucus goers wanting the person that most defines who they are?
That's the big struggle, and at the moment, a lot of the polls have suggested that there's a sort of pragmatism out there, and a lot of the voters, even the evangelical voters that are usually moved by, a core set of issues, really look at the electability issue, the kind of leadership issue, and are leaning in that direction. And that's, of course, what Romney wants more than anything, because that's really his main pitch.
Because Romney's the head candidate.
Well, the register poll, if you look at the various attributes they tested, the only one where he really shines is electability, and he is way ahead of everybody else on that. But on all other attributes, he doesn't. So if Mitt Romney wins these caucuses, it will be because the Iowa voters decided electability above all was what they wanted.
And in a crowd that really, really wants President Obama to be a one-term president, right, you've got to believe that a lot of these folks are going in there going, he's not with me but on everything, but he could win.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly. That's right. Well, that's what they think. I'm mirroring them. Dan Balz, Washington Post, Neil King, The Wall Street Journal.